Hey everybody, it's Safi and Marco Dish Out on Movies, the only movie review show on YouTube to review movies in terms of food. And it's just Marco here once again to review Buddy Valastro's Cake Dynasty, Season 1, Episode 1, Totally Wicked Cake. Now this show is following Cake Boss, which used to be on, and I should start off by saying, Safi and I, we watched all the Cake Boss shows. We watched the whole series of Cake Boss, which ended up being very surprising because as it went along, it started to have like some weird like plot twists like that you never would have expected. I won't actually give them away or talk about them because this episode isn't about that show. It's about this show, which is, trying to be its own thing, I guess. And then we also watched Next Great Baker, which that show had like a big issue in it where like they had this guy in season 2 and he used like box cake ingredients. And like I get that was like a bad thing, but they were really mean to him. And then apparently he died in the war. And so, like, that was terrible. And then I also watched Buddy's Bakery Rescue, which I think that show's kind of underrated. I had a lot of fun with that show. And, it only had one season. And I kind of wish that they had more seasons of that because, honestly, it was a little bit better than Kitchen Nightmares. Like, it was basically Kitchen Nightmares, but with Buddy. The thing that kind of set it apart, though, is the way that Buddy deals with things. He's a lot more creative. He's a lot more like, he just has a different style of like the way that he goes about solving the problems, whereas, the way that Gordon Ramsay solves problems, very different, And nowadays, Gordon, he makes frozen food. And and so it's probably not the best thing to have Kitchen Nightmares with him anymore if he is releasing frozen meals. It'd probably be better to have Buddy, who we have also gotten several cakes from the bakery. We got a rainbow cake, which was really good. We got the sampler cake platter. That one kind of got fucked up, though, because when it arrived here, the UPS, they held it hostage over the weekend, and so they left it like in the back of their UPS vehicle for the whole weekend, and like all the cake was kind of crap after that because they weren't refrigerated properly or anything, so that was kind of like a bummer. And then I'm trying to think, and then also we bought cakes that they sold in the stores too, because at a certain time, they used to have, like, where you could buy some, like, generic cakes at the grocery store. And we bought some of those as well. So, yeah, like, we're big fans of, like, the whole Cake Boss franchise is what I'm trying to say. And so, I was really, like, looking forward to reviewing this because this is one of those shows for a while, or at least Cake Boss was. It was one of that shows where I really wondered, like, should I review it? Like, should we go back and review, like, each season, because we love it so much? And then also, I got one of his recipe books, and that's how I made that pizza, the only pizza I've ever made at home was the pizza from his cookbook, and it was really good. And his red wine risotto was really, really good, too. So his recipe books are really good as well. So anyways, this show though, I was kind of like hesitant about it because it's called the Cake Dynasty. And I was really hoping that it wouldn't be like the Mark Wahlberg reality show, where it's just like a 25-minute cringe fest where it's just like Mark Wahlberg showing off and, just his stupid, like, superficial life with all his material things. And, that show was, like, awful. Like, that show, that is, like, ugh. ugh, it was just as bad as Mark Wahlberg's acting, let's just say. So I was really nervous about whether this show would be like Cake Boss. I thought that, since it's trying to be its own thing, maybe it's going to feel like a completely different thing that I don't like. Well, it starts off kind of feeling a little bit different than Cake Boss. It has, like, some of the style of filming seems a lot more, like, polished and clean, like a documentary, rather than kind of like I don't know, like, the TLC Cake Boss, especially the earlier seasons, it had this very, like, grungy kind of, like, home video quality to them. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it had this kind of interesting and, like, homey aesthetic that this show is lacking. This show kind of feels like it is shot very similarly to, like, anything else on the A&E network. It doesn't really feel like the Cake Boss aesthetic. And it starts off, too, where, like, the first things that you see are, like, you see his giant mansion, and then you see him driving in his fancy white car, like it's the fucking Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan driving his white car, getting a BJ, and I was really shocked that Buddy wasn't getting a BJ, or something, because, and here's another thing, I thought that showing Buddy, like, the first thing that you show in this show is Buddy driving. I thought that was a really bizarre choice considering his DUI offense that he got a couple of years ago. Like, of all the things to start off with, showing Buddy driving would have been, like, at the bottom of my list. Like, because it's just weird. It's just like, he's a baker. He's not a race car driver. It's like, why don't you show, like, the first thing is, like, him cooking something at home or something like that? Like, the first thing you show is him driving his fancy car, and you see his fancy mansion, and it's like, what is this show going to be? Is this going to be another Mark Wahlberg show? No. Thankfully, it did not turn out like that. And then another change that they kind of made that really stuck out to me was the confessional segments with Buddy. So, the confessional segments also kind of look pretty generic and lame, especially the ones with Buddy, because Buddy, he gets, like, this, like, throne, where he has this, like, recliner chair, and it looks like this, like, really fancy, polished room. And it does not look anything as good as, like, the old confessional videos looked like. And the reason why it just looks so bad is because it kind of looks fake. It looks like you're trying too hard to make this, like, look like a professional, like a documentary show, when it's like, this is a show about a guy making cake. And I really wonder, too, like, was that some sort of personal request of Buddy that he really wanted to sit down in, like, a recliner chair when he did these confessionals? Because it really looked weird. So let's get to the kind of the story of the episode. You have half of the episode is kind of devoted to making the big event cake, which that's very typical for Cake Boss. And then half the episode is kind of devoted to his family life, and in particular a story with Buddy Jr., which we will end up talking about. And by the way, Safi will be joining me next week to review the second episode and the third and the fourth. I just thought it would be more fair for me to just review this episode, since we were kind of blindsided with the show. We only knew it was coming out like a week ago. So I will say that. So anyways, their big cake assignment is that they have to make a cake for Wicked. The Broadway show, which Cool. That was all fun and everything, and that kind of reminded me of Cake Boss. So then also, Buddy wants Lisa, his wife, to have her own successes with having Carlo's Bakery vending machines. And I thought that was pretty cool. I was kind of sad they didn't go more into that, like of how that idea came up and everything. Like, I think the biggest issue that I had with this episode is that it did not feel in any way like it was trying to bridge the gap between Cake Boss and this show. You know, like, it felt more like it was just like a soft reboot of Cake Boss, where, you know, he reintroduces all his family members. He says, like, the same things he said about them in the original first episode. It doesn't really feel like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't feel like he like explains, like, okay, since Cake Boss, this happened and you know, this family member did this and this family member did this. He doesn't really do that a lot in this episode. And so I really hope that in the episodes going forward that they kind of explain more with the other, like, side characters, like what kind of has happened with them over the years since Cake Boss. Because, I mean, it is a reality show, and they have been able to squeeze a lot out of the Valastro family. And you think about all the years that they weren't filming the Valastro family, what kinds of shenanigans happened in that whole period of time where there wasn't any Cake Boss, you know? Like, I'd like to hear some stories about that, and hear about, like, in particular, the sculptor guy, was he Ralphie? The guy with the mustache? Like, what happened to him? Where's he? Because I thought he was with Buddy on Buddy versus Duff. So, you know, we didn't really see him at all this episode, so I just wonder, where'd he go? Like, did they make him sleep with the fishes or something? And then they kind of show them cooking a family dinner where the kids help cook. That was kind of fun, you know, they're trying... I think the people who made the show, they were kind of trying to do like a Godfather type thing, which is really funny because there's some other similarities to the Godfather in this episode too, I guess. But yeah, Buddy Jr. announces at this family dinner that he does not want to go to college. And it's so funny with that because, you know, they already talked about that in that one special episode that they made where Buddy got the hand injury. And so I was wondering, like, if they were going to bring that up again. And they did. And so that's kind of like the main family plot of this episode, is him not wanting to go to college. He wants to work at the bakery instead, and he wants to work his way up, you know, and be in the family business, and yeah. And then Buddy wakes up Buddy Jr. early, so like at 6 in the morning, to teach him what the bakery business will be like and cook some chocolate chip cookies. And now here we already have a problem, a big problem. Buddy Jr. didn't want to set a timer when cooking the food. And so he wants to cut corners. That is not going to work. Their first problem with the Wicked Cake is that Morrow does not put any dowels in the cake. And so he has to take off layers and put all these dowels in. That was kind of weird too. I mean, Buddy was kind of freaked out about that. I was kind of freaked out as well because, you know, after all these years, you'd think that, you know, you could do that in your sleep. It's like, yeah, no shit, it needs dowels. It needs some fucking fondant and graham crackers too, right? Or, well, no, not graham crackers, Rice Krispie treats. And then the new kind of head sculptor is this girl named Anna. She's a very nerdy, like, technical girl. She's a very different character than Ralph, who is kind of like a creative weirdo guy. And I'm not saying that like any of these are bad things. I'm just kind of identifying them as they are. Like the character that she is, it's really funny that she's kind of like this 1990s stereotype of like that nerdy girl. She's got this kind of crazy hair and she's got the glasses, and I just feel like you could literally have that cliche plot from like a superhero movie where she takes off the glasses and then she becomes like a bad guy or something. Yeah, she seems pretty good, but like, yeah, I'd like to know more about her. And in general, I think another thing with this episode is like with the old Cake Boss show. I think I memorized like every single like person's face from that whole show. Like I remember that one girl and that one girl and that other girl. And from this new show, there are some familiar faces, but overall, like, we're not really like shown them personally and kind of introduced to them in the way that we really should be. If they're going to have this whole show now continue on and on. And so once again, it's like a thing of like, are they going to introduce these people later on? Are we going to get to know them moving forward or what? Because it's just kind of like, oh, they're there. These people are there. And then Buddy's at home again, and they had this really cringeworthy thing where Buddy had a shirt saying that he's a trophy husband. That was really cringeworthy. And then Buddy is really biased about Buddy Jr. not wanting to go to college because he wants to be able to build something with him that he wished he could have done with his dad. And so then he gets an idea, and he has probably one of the funniest quotes in cooking show history, which is, I think you have to learn how to eat shit. Eat shit and eat it and eat it and eat it, and it makes you stronger and better. That is legitimately a quote from Buddy Valastro. I think you have to learn how to eat shit. That's what Gordon Ramsay should say before he serves you his frozen dinners. Buddy gives Junior a factory experience, and there is kind of mixed results. Buddy Jr. thinks he knows more than he does. He definitely needs more training, but he doesn't give up. And that was a very good sign because, if he wasn't meant to do this, he would have given up. That's the truth. Because that's all that it takes for, like, anything. Like, the saying is don't give up. And so, if you give up on anything, then, you're not meant to do it. But if you don't give up, you're meant to do it for sure. And then later on, Buddy takes Junior back to the original bakery, and they have kind of this emotional sort of moment down in the basement there. That was kind of that was kind of a moment that felt like it was weird to me because, like, Buddy Jr., like, after he hears this whole, like, emotional story, his first reaction is like, yeah, I think I'd like to work in the factory a little bit more, actually. And Buddy's like, and Junior's like, I think I'd like to actually work in the factory a bit more and get some more experience there and see how it goes. And meanwhile, Buddy's like, and then Buddy's finally like, I really want you to, I think that'd be great, son. And that really felt like a typical, like a kitchen nightmare style moment. So, like, I wondered if, like, the producers kind of pushed for him to do that whole sequence because, I mean, it really felt like kind of forced. it felt like I don't know, like just something about it felt kind of off. Like they could have waited to do this like in maybe a couple of episodes or something, but it felt like since it's episode 1, they had to have like the emotional moment, you know. And so I would say overall, and I'm making the cake, the wicked cake, I'm not going to go through all of that. I mean, that's kind of pointless. That part was good. That was a lot like Cake Boss used to be. So overall, this show kind of feels like an extended version of Cake Boss, with a little bit more of like a mainstreamy feel to it. And I feel like maybe making the episodes 45 minutes wasn't the best idea, because when I look at like all the extra stuff that is in this episode, it doesn't really make the episode any better. You know, like the episode has some problems with just being the first episode of a show all on its own, but then it has other problems too that are like, so I really feel like instead of like just making this like 45-minute episode, that maybe they should have like cut the fat and like really trim this episode into something that was a better like first episode introducing you to this show, because it doesn't really fulfill the promise of being Cake Dynasty. Like, and if you get that, like, it just kind of feels like they named it Cake Dynasty so that they could make the show Cake Boss Part 2. It doesn't feel like they had like an idea of like, oh, you know, it would be really interesting if we made a show about the Cake Dynasty and we show all these different aspects, because it really didn't go into much detail with all these different aspects. You know, it felt like just an extended Cake Boss episode. So I would give it a B+. I would say that the good outweighed the bad. But yeah, I still would say that it could be better. And I am also being a little bit more nicer to it, because I know that, you know, in the next couple of episodes, they could have things that I have been asking for this episode, if that makes any sense. You know, so maybe some of my criticisms, they really shouldn't even be criticisms, because they'll get fixed in the next couple episodes. And the cake looked pretty cool. You know, I thought that the eyes looked a little bit off, but, you know, overall it looked very beautiful and very colorful. It looked pretty good. And one thing, too, that I really wonder is, you know, with the old Cake Boss show, one of the fun things was that Buddy would do these cakes, it felt like, for, like, anybody. It felt like if, you know, you'd have those scenes where he'd be at the little consultation table with, like, a couple or sisters or a mother and a daughter or something, and it just felt a lot more, like, personable and a lot more, like, I don't know. And so now, though, it feels like, is he just going to be doing all these cakes for, like, big level clients? Because that would be a big disappointment, in my opinion, of, like, I'd like to see, like, more personable cakes, like, you know, that Bridezilla cake, for example. Like, that was a really good episode. And I think, too, like, didn't Cake Boss episodes have, like, the big client cake along with, like, the more, like, personalized cake? Like, wouldn't they have, like, the different projects in the episodes? So yeah, I'd like to see something like that going forward. I wouldn't just like to see like big event cakes. So anyways, I overall enjoyed the show, but I did have my problems with it. Please like this video and comment. Is this show worth reviewing? Because this was a little bit of a rocky review, since this is the first ever, like, Cake Boss thing that I've ever reviewed. And, yeah. And then please subscribe to our channel if you'd like to see more Cake Dynasty reviews. Goodbye, everybody. See you soon.